Well, hello and welcome. My name is Val Guyette. I am the sales director for Vote by Mail at BlueCrest, and I want to welcome you to our webinar today, where we'll be discussing both ways to optimize the delivery of your mail ballots, as well as ways to track those through the process and hopefully improve the experience of your voters when it comes to vote by mail, as well as perhaps enhance the confidence they have with this process. I have Chris Lean, who's our Executive Vice President of Postal Affairs. Chris has been in this business for over 20 years as well. And in fact, Chris is on a number of postal boards and committees, has tremendous insight as to what's happening with the Postal Service and some of their directions. And I think will be extremely helpful in sharing with you things that will be important and things you'll want to know about moving forward as it relates to the USPS and how to best utilize it. And last but not least, we have Joe Aramita. Joe is the Senior Director of Software for us. And Joe is going to then go ahead and share some of the specific solutions that BlueCrest has in regards to optimizing postal delivery or for implementing solutions to help track mail ballots. And we want to focus on the areas in orange, which are just a piece of it, right? And you know, part of why we look at this is the idea that different folks have different priorities and different needs. And this is something that we think everybody can benefit from. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and pass it over to Chris Lean, who can share with you some of the insights. You know, when you think about the Postal Service, you have a long, complex process, and part of that process you don't have a lot of control over, which is the post office. But you're still responsible and still have to answer questions to your voters. So let me pass it over to Chris to share with you ways to optimize that and kind of what's going on with the Postal Service.
All right, thank you, Val. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit with what's going on. But I want to start first by taking a look at 2020. And Lauren, you did an outstanding job, talking about some of the things that you experienced. Well, the Postal Service put together a publication on a broader aspect, just sort of looking at how the 2020 election went. And the first thing, which is great, is that we had record turnout. Right, it was the largest voter turnout since 1900 in terms of percentage, and it also represented the largest amount of vote by mail opportunities that we saw through that. The Postal Service handled or processed over 135 million ballots. That's both sending out and receiving those ballots back, and they did a fairly good job in terms of the service standard, 97.9% delivered within that 3-day window, noting that it's on average about 2.1 days to do that. Now, you have to keep in mind, though, the Postal Service is going to be changing in fact, they've already changed their service standard. It's no longer 1 to 3 days for that service standard window for first-class mail. It is now 1 to 5 days. A lot of the mail that the Postal Service is handling is no longer sent by air freight, being handled on ground transportation. So that brings into account a number of other variables in terms of mail deliverability that the Postal Service has to deal with. We're confident in working together with the Postal Service that we can make sure that all the properly addressed ballots can be delivered in a timely manner, but it's really key to get those out as soon as possible. One of the things from 2020 that caught my eye is 4.8 million ballots were entered into the Postal Service between October 26th and November 3rd. That's a significant volume. In fact, during that time period, the Postal Service effectively deferred some types of other mail pieces just to really focus on the ballots and in some cases some political mail, but it was mostly on the election mail at that time. Now they're committed, Postal Service is committed for next year, for 2022, to continue to put more emphasis on making sure that the mail is processed and delivered in a timely manner. But we need to work together with them to make sure that that happens, because we want to get as much of those ballots processed efficiently and delivered to the right recipients and returned on time, through that whole wheel, Val, that you talked about. And so really the first place that we want to start is the beginning, and that's about address quality. Address quality is really the foundation for so many things, which is why the Postal Service has a jointly developed and prepared publication, number 28, that talks about address quality standards. So what I mean by jointly prepared, this is something that's been put together by the Postal Service and the mailing industry. In fact, it's been in existence for a number of decades. Val, you had mentioned my service in the mailing industry here now, and also with BlueCrest. It's actually over 30 years that I've been involved in the mailing industry. And I serve at the pleasure of the Postmaster General on the Mailers Technical Advisory Committee, having been a former chairman for that particular committee. But during around that 2004 to 2008-9 timeframe, I was the industry elected address quality chair. And so we focus quite a bit on address quality. And the reason for it is that we still have a big undeliverable as addressed mail problem here in the United States. 6 billion pieces of mail are not arriving in a timely manner. And in fact, out of that 6 billion, 4 billion pieces of mail are disposed by the Postal Service every year because they're not addressed properly. Now, that's marketing mail. That's not first-class mail. But it's still a significant problem, which is why we have these address quality standards. Now, Publication 28 does go through these. It talks about standardizing the address. It talks about using the appropriate abbreviations. It talks about formatting and placement of that address to make sure that it's going to be able to be read by the Postal Service processing equipment. So it talks a lot about having an address that's complete, all the required elements are present, and correct, that they match exactly the standard that the Postal Service requires. It's a great publication, certainly worth a look if you want to take a look at that to make sure that you're following that. The good news is that all of these requirements are part of the software technology, software and hardware technology that companies like BlueCrest make available. We are certified by the Postal Service both for our CAS, which is the Coding Accuracy Support System certification, and the MAS certification, which is used by the physical sorting devices, typically referred to as mailing optical reading devices, MLOCRs. The zip code, you're probably familiar with that. So one of the things to talk about for the zip code here is the zip+4. When you look at it as zip code on an address, sometimes it's, you might say, well, that's a deliverable address. I've got a 9-digit zip code. It looks like everything is present there. But when you talk about high-rise apartments, sometimes it gives a false impression that that's a truly deliverable address at the finest level. And what I mean by that is a high-rise apartment has a primary address and a secondary address, the apartment number, the unit number. And if you don't have that secondary address in the address block, what will happen is the Postal Service will, or the software will assign a default zip+4. What it means is that the ballot or the piece of mail that's being sent to that recipient may not get into their actual mail receptacle, maybe on a table in the lobby, or the carrier may not know where to place that, and then may end up being undeliverable as address and ends up being returned. So it's really important as you're putting the addresses together that you've included the secondary address line, the apartment number, if that's part of it, so that we can make sure that we can see that when we assign the proper zip code. And again, as I mentioned before, Publication 28, a lot of great information in it, but the best thing is that it's all built right into the technology, and that's part of what the Relia-Vote system is going to be able to do. So that's a little bit of the address quality. Turning then to some of the other ways that we can communicate to the Postal Service how this piece is going to be expedited for delivery, and that has to do with the postage statement. Today the Postal Service's systems are so data dependent on information to be able to ensure that you're getting the type of expected delivery that you're paying for, and that is required. One way that we do that is to communicate with the Postal Service, both in terms of a human readable aspect as well as through data. Now here I'm showing you one of the lessons learned coming out of the last election is identifying on the postage statement that, hey, this is an official election mail, or this is political campaign mailing. Even though it might be marketing mail, which has a different service standard, just by identifying to the Postal Service that this is related to a campaign or election, a ballot, it will identify the Postal Service that, hey, they need to process this mailing with that extra level of expedited service. We communicate that digitally as well to the Postal Service. So as you're working with the technology, we're able to communicate that through to the Postal Service's Postal One system, so that as the mailing information is uploaded, they'll have a blueprint of how that mailing is. So they'll know that, okay, all these pieces that are coming in that are associated with that mailing are going to get that higher level of expedited delivery. Next page. Can you go to the next slide, please? Awesome, thank you. So mail piece design, just to talk about that for a little bit. Now, first of all, again, the Postal Service has put a lot of effort on election mail. And they put together a number of different great publications. This is another one, the Official Election Kit. This represents a lot of good suggestions on mail piece design. Again, I want to call out that a lot of these things are already built into the software technology, so you don't have to go through the details, but it's worth taking a look at or having it handy. But I will caution you, one of the things you're going to find out right away is you're going to get into a lot of new acronyms. Postal Service loves those, and you're going to come across things like MIDs and STIDs and CRIDs. These are the mailer identification number. This is a service type identification code. This is the customer registration identification code. And so these are all codes and numbers that are what I call baked into the barcode, the Intelligent Mail barcode, and it helps the Postal Service to be able to read the information on the mail piece, associate that piece with that election mail that we've identified on the postage statement or through digital, so that it gets that type of handling that we're asking for that. So there's a lot of information in this kit, but again, it's all about getting that correct and accurate, and we put that into the technology. I do want to talk about and remind everyone, though, that whether you're doing first-class mail or marketing mail, it's very important to understand the piece layout and some of the different types of service standards. For example, first-class mail, because of the higher postage, and Lauren had talked about the cost of that postage, being high. A lot of that is because there's certain types of services that are built into that price. They're not built into the marketing mail. You have to optionally select that. That's again part of what the service type code is that they talks about in this publication. So you do have availability on things, but a lot of you, I'm sure, are doing first-class mail, so it's all built right into that. And again, BlueCrest makes this easier for you because we put all this information right into the Relia-Vote technology. Next page. I mentioned the Intelligent Mail barcode, and you can take a look on the address here that's on this envelope, the sample envelope, and it calls out the IMB specifically. You wouldn't see IMB printed on there, but you would see the barcode. Inside that barcode are 5 key pieces of information. I touched on a couple of those before, but what's in there is a unique serial number that makes that piece unique throughout the Postal Service's system for that full 45 days. And so that allows the Postal Service to accurately track where these pieces are. And by using the automation compatible envelopes and having the official mail logo on that piece, you're going to get that type of delivery. So the logo on the piece that the Postal Service talks about in the publication I mentioned before, that helps to just visually identify for the carrier what's going on. But the barcode is what identifies to the Postal Service's processing equipment what that piece is, where it needs to go, and what type of services along with that. So as the Relia-Vote technology or the BlueCrest technology is building that barcode for you, we're putting in all those pieces that help to get that mail piece delivered correctly for that barcode. And by having that go through the Postal Service's system, the Postal Service begins to collect information as part of what they call informed visibility. And that gives an opportunity to leverage data that we can now provide additional value when we talk about things like mail tracking. And Joe, why don't you share with us a little bit about what that mail tracking capabilities can do and maybe some of the value for our listeners.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper into the process and specifically a lot of the tracking, but I think it's important first to kind of baseline, why ballot tracking is important, right? Tracking is somewhat of a generic term. There are lots of meetings and interpretations of it, but it's important to note that it enables a wide variety of benefits. And the first one, touch on here is automation. Right? When we talk about tracking, a lot of the tracking drives an automation process, the ability to control and provide feedback on each process step a ballot goes through, and in particular, as it works its way through the USPS and in their process steps. The ability to drive coordination of automated equipment, where they get printed and inserted and sorted and routed and delivered, right? That coordination between different process steps, tracking enables a lot of that. And the biggest part of automation is a reduced cost, right? Lauren talked about, reducing postage costs, right? Automating a lot of these steps certainly drives a cost benefit into the whole process. And that's kind of a basis for a lot of things we do. Tracking enables process assurance, right? Process is consistent and repeatable. Again, when a lot of processes are manual, things can sometimes be inconsistent. Different people may have a different way of doing things, where automated steps can be repeatable. And this drives the accuracy of the process. We want it to be as accurate as possible, eliminate mistakes all along the way, right? That's kind of the whole point of process assurance. Visibility is a big part, right? I mean, the post office even calls it informed visibility as you track through the post office, but it's this notion of real-time visibility throughout each process step. And this can be thought of as, from a batch or a job perspective, as it works through the various different process steps, and then even down to the individual ballot and envelope perspective. to be able to have visibility into all process steps as it goes through, and in real time is an important aspect. Another reason we do tracking is this notion called anomaly detection. Mistakes happen, whether it's human based or process based. Things sometimes get stuck or delayed, or there's an error or omission. When we enable all this tracking, the ability to detect those anomalies and then react to them is certainly an important aspect of why this tracking is important. And then finally, this notion of an audit trail that extends the chain of custody, right? These days, it's not only important that you get it 100% correct, but you have to prove that you got it 100% correct. So the ability to keep that history and that audit trail for every ballot, through every process, through every touch, is certainly an important aspect. And this is one of the things tracking enables. So there are a few different types of ballot tracking that I want to talk about. Again, we're going to focus more on the postal side of things today, but a big part of this is preparation, right? Preparing those ballots, making them traceable to begin with, both at the batch level and at the document level, is an important first step. To identify all components that go into an envelope or a ballot, make sure the right ballot pages are associated with the right voter. And then, as Chris mentioned, validating those addresses, making sure they're deliverable, assigning that intelligent mail barcode in an automated fashion, and managing all the appropriate STIDs and MIDs and serial numbers and zip codes and delivery points. All right, all that is handled in an automated fashion, and to make sure those ballots are deliverable. In addition, the pre-sort aspect to address postage is something that we do up front as part of preparation. And that not only optimizes the postage spend, but also produces those postage statements with all the right check boxes checked and delivered electronically to the post office as documents are submitted. So this is, all these things are done to prepare both the batches and the ballots themselves to achieve all the benefits of tracking as we go. You can see there's an important, no, back one, not done. Important part of the tracking that has to do with the production side of things: printing, inserting, outbound sorting, inbound sorting. Preparing those ballots allows automation through all those steps, whether they're done in-house in a county, or some of those steps are outsourced, right? It can be either combination. And then mail delivery, outbound, entry into the post office, sorting scans, out for delivery to the voter, and when they return them, same thing. A round trip visibility is important and is part of the kind of overall tracking strategy. Next one. So putting those kind of pieces together, we like to view the process in the notion of this one-to-one validation. To gain visibility across the entire process, putting all the various validation pieces together. And again, it all starts with that preparation of the voter data, the ballot images, various other components that go into the ballot to collect and start building that foundation for traceability. That includes potentially assigning barcodes to different sheets to drive automation, and of course, generating those unique intelligent mail barcodes for both the outbound envelope and the inbound envelope. That enables the tracking and invisibility out to the voter when they place that in the mailbox to send back, also the visibility back to the county for tabulation. And this whole process, is one-to-one validation, allows the confirmation that every request produced exactly one ballot going out, which produced exactly one return coming in, and they're all matched and accounted for, completely visible, completely auditable, right? It's this closed loop end-to-end process. So looking into a little bit of some of the tracking capabilities that are available, one of the easiest, quickest ways to view how ballots are being delivered is graphical on a map, right? As batches have been submitted, as they get routed to voters, through visualizations like a map, as a sample you see here, it's easy to see ballot timing and delivery rates, and provide an overall view of how things are getting delivered and when they may be completely delivered, right? This also helps in a graphical way identify some anomalies in the process. If certain regions are not showing up as nearly complete or complete, right? This might be some trigger to look into why those areas might not be getting what they're looking for, right? And this is kind of proactive tracking, if you want to look at this, right? Looking at the whole process visually as ballots are going out through the informed visibility overlaid on a map, to monitor the delivery of the various batches. A lot of times information is needed at the ballot level. So when the information at each ballot, next slide, please. Ballot tracking drills down to individual ballots as well. The map view is great for an overall visualization, but for an audit or an inquiry or some other purposes, right, a more detailed history is needed. So in addition to the visualization that provides a quick view, right, there's also the detailed exactly which steps and times and dates every envelope, both on the way out to the voter and back, go through. And again, this could be used to determine where they ended up, or if they were delivered, or delivery timing, and how long at an individual ballot things took to get to where they were supposed to go, right? This is more of a reactive based tracking. Normally this is more useful if there is an anomaly discovered and you want to understand more about the delivery process. It's a couple of interesting things about this, right? It's searchable by voter information. You could use name or voter ID or other information to find a path both outbound and inbound of a particular ballot. Often cases, this is integrated to other systems, right? These type of details are also designed to be integrated through various other systems a county may have. Maybe there's a voter portal where they could do self-lookup, a variety of other ways that this data can be used, and a lot of interesting interaction points, integration points, I'm sorry, with this data to get other advantages. In best practice, right, in summary, it's important to look at the process holistically. We look at the process from, I've got to prepare not only the batches, but the ballots to all the ballot pages for automation and traceability. And this allows the process to ensure that the correct ballot is assigned to each voter. The ballot packet contains all the required components. It has the right address. It's going to be delivered. It's got the right intelligent mail barcode and various other IDs used as far as the process is concerned. It's got the right postal documentation, so the post office is going to handle it in an appropriate way, and it gets delivered, and you can prove the whole process out to the voter. Going back from the voter, also that same visibility as the voter returns the mail. Full forensics and audit tracking are available both directions. And then, verification and auditing on inbound automation processes like sorters that route the ballots for tabulation can also or often part of the process. And then, we're always keeping in mind postage savings. The process needs to be efficient, cost effective, both from a postage and labor perspective, and still provides all that automated assurance along the way. So that's kind of sums up all the benefits and ways we track.
Great. Thank you, Joe.